From a star who vomited after every flight to a deleted Swedish car stunt that vanished from history, Blue Thunder's production was as wild as its aerial dogfights. This 1983 helicopter thriller hides secrets about engine failures mid-shoot, a deliberately darker original script, and helicopters that ended up playing Soviet invaders. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Blue Thunder, 1983. Fact 1. Malcolm McDowell's airborne terror. Malcolm McDowell might have played the cold, calculating villain Colonel Cochrane in Blue Thunder, 1983. But in real life, he was absolutely terrified of flying. The British actor had such an intense fear of being in the air that he would become physically ill after helicopter flights during production, often vomiting once he was safely back on the ground. His wife at the time, Mary Steenburgen, later revealed that she couldn't even convince him to board a 747 passenger jet for regular travel, let alone get him comfortable in a military-style helicopter. This created a fascinating paradox on set, because McDowell was supposed to portray a fearless Vietnam veteran pilot who handles Blue Thunder's adversary helicopter with expert precision and icy confidence. Director John Badham and the crew had to work around McDowell's genuine terror, carefully choreographing his scenes to minimize actual flight time while maximizing the illusion that he was in complete control. What makes this even more interesting is that if you watch the final aerial battle sequence closely, you can actually see McDowell's real discomfort bleeding through in certain shots. Those grimaces and tense expressions that make Cochrane seem so intense and focused aren't entirely acting. They're partially McDowell's authentic fear showing on his face as the helicopter banked and maneuvered through the air. The production team later admitted that some of McDowell's best villain moments came from his genuine anxiety, which translated into an unsettling, almost manic energy on screen. It's a perfect example of an actor's real-life limitations accidentally enhancing their performance, turning what could have been a problem into one of the film's most memorable antagonist portrayals. Fact 2. Roy Scheider's Jaws escape. Plan Roy Scheider had a very strategic reason for accepting the lead role in Blue Thunder, and it had nothing to do with helicopters or action sequences. The actor was desperately trying to avoid being cast in Jaws 3D, the third installment of the shark franchise that had made him famous as Police Chief Martin Brody. After appearing in the first two Jaws films, Scheider had grown tired of the character and wanted to move on to different types of roles that would showcase his range as an actor. However, Universal Studios still held him under contract and had the legal right to bring him back for another sequel. Scheider knew that if he simply refused the role outright, he could face serious legal consequences and potential career damage. So instead, he came up with a clever solution. He would make himself completely unavailable by committing to another major film production that would overlap with the Jaws 3D shooting schedule. Blue Thunder was perfect for this purpose because it was a big-budget action film with a lengthy production timeline that would keep him occupied for months. Scheider later admitted in interviews that the studio executives probably understood his strategy all along, saying they knew better than to ask him to reprise the Brody role once he was committed to Blue Thunder. The plan worked perfectly. Scheider got to play the complex Vietnam-haunted helicopter pilot Frank Murphy instead of returning to Amity Island, and Jaws 3D went forward with Dennis Quaid in a completely different storyline. It was a masterclass in strategic career management, showing how actors sometimes have to make professional chess moves to escape roles that threaten to define and limit their careers. Fact 3. Warren Oates never saw it. One of Blue Thunder's most tragic behind-the-scenes stories involves actor Warren Oates, who played Frank Murphy's close friend and fellow pilot, Sergeant Short. Oates delivered a warm, memorable performance as the gruff but loyal partner who believes in Murphy even when others doubt him, but he never got to see his work on the big screen. On April 3, 1982, while the film was still in post-production, Warren Oates suffered a fatal heart attack at his home in Los Angeles. He was only 53 years old. His sudden death sent shockwaves through Hollywood, as Oates had been a beloved character actor who had worked with directors like Sam Peckinpah, Monty Hellman, and Steven Spielberg throughout his career. The loss was particularly devastating for the Blue Thunder cast and crew, who had just wrapped filming and were looking forward to promoting the movie together. Oates' death forced Columbia Pictures to delay the film's release from late 1982 into 1983, partly out of respect and partly to allow time for the shock to settle before marketing what was supposed to be an exciting summer action film. When Blue Thunder finally premiered, the filmmakers included a dedication card that appeared in the end credits reading, "For Warren Oates, with love for all the joy you gave us." It was a simple but heartfelt tribute to an actor who had brought authenticity and humanity to every role he played. His performance as Short remains one of the film's emotional anchors, making his absence from the premiere all the more poignant for everyone involved. Fact 4. Real mid-air helicopter failure. During one of the most dangerous sequences in Blue Thunder, something went terribly wrong that could have resulted in a fatal accident. The production was filming the intense scene where Murphy and Lyman Good are ambushed by Cochran's team near a downtown Los Angeles skyscraper, requiring precise aerial choreography between multiple helicopters flying at high speeds between buildings. For this sequence, the film used a real MD-500 Defender helicopter, the same military model that would later inspire the design of Cochran's attack chopper in the story. During one of the takes, as the helicopter was maneuvering through the urban canyon of skyscrapers, the pilot suddenly lost power. The engine had suffered an actual mechanical failure, while the aircraft was hundreds of feet in the air, surrounded by buildings, with a film crew and expensive camera equipment aboard. What happened next was a testament to the pilot's skill and training. He immediately initiated an auto-rotation maneuver, which is an emergency procedure where the pilot uses the helicopter's falling momentum to keep the rotor blades spinning, essentially turning the aircraft into a controlled glider. The pilot managed to guide the powerless helicopter away from the buildings and toward a parking lot that, fortunately, had been cleared of vehicles and bystanders as part of the film's safety perimeter. The helicopter came down hard but relatively controlled, and incredibly, the pilot walked away with only minor injuries, while the helicopter itself sustained only minor damage. The cast and crew were shaken by how close they had come to a tragedy, and production was halted for several days while safety protocols were reviewed, and the incident was investigated. Fact 5. The original script was darker. The Blue Thunder that audiences saw in theaters was actually a significantly toned-down version of what screenwriter Dan O'Bannon originally envisioned. O'Bannon, who had previously written the science fiction classic Alien, crafted a first-draft screenplay that was far darker and more psychologically disturbing than the hero versus conspiracy thriller that eventually made it to screen. In O'Bannon's original version, Frank Murphy wasn't a troubled but ultimately heroic Vietnam veteran fighting against a corrupt government program. Instead, he was written as a genuinely mentally ill man suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, whose grip on reality was tenuous at best. The original script had Murphy stealing Blue Thunder not to expose a conspiracy, but because his delusions convinced him that shadowy forces were after him, and he needed the helicopter's power to defend himself. What followed was a destructive rampage across Los Angeles, with Murphy using Blue Thunder's weapon systems against targets he believed were threats, but were actually innocent people and buildings. The climax involved the military scrambling F-16 fighter jets to intercept and ultimately shoot down the rogue helicopter over the city, killing Murphy in a tragic ending that emphasized the devastating cost of untreated mental illness and unchecked military technology. Studio executives and producers felt this version was too dark and nihilistic for mainstream audiences, especially for a summer action film. They brought in additional writers to completely overhaul Murphy's character, transforming him into a sympathetic protagonist who discovers a real conspiracy and heroically fights to expose it, giving the film a more conventional good versus evil structure with a satisfying victory at the end. Fact 6. French helicopters playing American. One of Blue Thunder's best-kept secrets is that the menacing high-tech helicopter at the center of the film wasn't actually an American military prototype at all. The production used two French-made Aerospatiale SA-341G Gazelle helicopters that were purchased back in 1973 for $190,000 each. These light reconnaissance helicopters had to be transformed into convincing cutting-edge American military aircraft, which required extensive modifications and some Hollywood trickery. The special effects and production design teams went to work covering the Gazelles with bolt-on fiberglass parts, including the distinctive angular nose cone, fake weapons pods, sensor equipment, and the menacing chin-mounted cannon that became Blue Thunder's signature feature. However, all these additions created a serious problem. The modifications made the helicopters so much heavier than their original design that they could barely fly at the speeds the script required for exciting action sequences. The sleek, powerful appearance of Blue Thunder in the movie was partially an illusion created through careful camera work, undercranking the film to make the helicopter appear faster than it actually was, and using clever editing to cut around the aircraft's limitations. For the most dramatic high-speed shots, the production used the unmodified Gazelles or switched to lightweight mock-ups and models. The pilots also had to develop special techniques to compensate for the extra weight, often removing some of the bolt-on panels between shots to improve performance, then quickly reattaching them for close-ups. This constant modification and adaptation turned the French Gazelles into convincing American super helicopters, though the deception required far more work than audiences ever realized while watching the film. Fact 7. The loop was fake. The most spectacular moment in Blue Thunder's climactic aerial battle is when Frank Murphy pulls off an impossible 360-degree loop to get behind Cochrane's helicopter and gain the upper hand in their dogfight. It's a breathtaking sequence that looks absolutely real on screen, with the massive helicopter seemingly defying physics as it completes a full vertical circle through the air. However, this iconic moment was achieved through movie magic rather than actual stunt flying. The real Blue Thunder helicopter, already struggling with weight issues from all its modifications, was completely incapable of performing such an extreme aerobatic maneuver. Even stripped-down helicopters rarely attempt full loops because the rotor physics are entirely different from fixed-wing aircraft, making such stunts incredibly dangerous and difficult. To create this shot, the production turned to RC helicopter manufacturer John Simone Jr., who built a highly detailed 1/6 scale radio-controlled model of Blue Thunder specifically for this sequence. Simone was an expert in RC helicopter aerobatics and had the skill to make the small model perform maneuvers that would be impossible or suicidal with a full-sized aircraft. The model was filmed against the real Los Angeles skyline using careful camera placement and lighting to match the surrounding live-action footage. The switch between the real helicopter and the model is so seamless that audiences had no idea they were watching a miniature performing the actual loop. This clever combination of practical model work and live-action filming created one of the film's most memorable moments, proving that sometimes the most impressive stunts are the ones that never actually happened in the way audiences think they did. Fact 8. JAFO got cleaned up. One of Blue Thunder's most quotable elements is the acronym JAFO, which Officer Lyman Good uses to describe his role as Murphy's observer. In the film, JAFO stands for Just Another Observer, but that's actually a cleaned-up version of the real police and military slang. The authentic acronym used by actual helicopter crews is Just Another Effing Observer, with the F word fully spelled out. It's a somewhat irreverent but affectionate term that observers and co-pilots use to describe themselves, acknowledging their supporting role while the pilot does the actual flying. The film managed to use JAFO repeatedly without ever spelling out what it meant, allowing adult audiences to understand the implied profanity while keeping the movie accessible for a wider audience. However, when Blue Thunder was adapted into a television series in 1984, the Network Standards and Practices Department had to address the acronym more directly. The TV show starred James Ferrantino as the lead pilot and a pre-Saturday Night Live Dana Carvey as the observer, whose character was named Clinton Wonderlove. Since television in the mid-1980s had much stricter content rules than theatrical films, even the implied profanity of JAFO was considered too risky. The producers came up with a sanitized alternative, changing the acronym to Just Another Frustrated Observer, which kept the JAFO abbreviation intact while making it completely family-friendly. This allowed the TV series to maintain continuity with the film's terminology while conforming to broadcast standards. Dana Carvey would later joke in interviews that playing a character named Clinton Wonderlove, who was officially designated as frustrated, was perhaps the most 1980s television thing imaginable. Fact 9. The TV show lasted 11 episodes. Blue Thunder's success at the box office seemed to guarantee that a television adaptation would be a hit, but the 1984 series turned out to be one of the shortest-lived action shows of the decade. ABC greenlit the show with high hopes, casting James Ferrantino as Frank Murphy, the role Roy Scheider had played in the film, and bringing in Dana Carvey, years before his Saturday Night Live fame, as Clinton Jaffo Wonderlove. The series had decent production values, real helicopter footage, and the built-in recognition of the Blue Thunder name. However, it faced an impossible challenge in the ratings war. The show premiered in January 1984 in a primetime slot where it went head-to-head against two powerful competitors. CBS's Airwolf, which was essentially the same concept but with a more charismatic lead in Jan Michael Vincent and a cooler-looking helicopter, and the phenomenon that was Dallas, the primetime soap opera that was still pulling in massive audiences during this period. Blue Thunder simply couldn't compete against such established programming. Viewers who wanted helicopter action preferred Airwolf's more fantastical approach and supersonic speed, while those who weren't interested in aircraft-based action shows chose Dallas instead. After just 11 episodes, ABC pulled the plug on Blue Thunder, making it one of the fastest cancellations of any show based on a successful film. The series is now largely forgotten, except by dedicated fans of 1980s television, and Dana Carvey rarely mentions it in his career retrospectives, preferring to focus on his comedy work that came later. It remains a cautionary tale about how theatrical success doesn't always translate to television, especially when the competition is fierce. Fact 10. Helicopters became Soviet invaders. After Blue Thunder finished filming, the two modified French Gazelle helicopters that had served as the movie's star aircraft needed to find a new home. Columbia Pictures sold both helicopters to an aviation salvage collector in New Mexico who specialized in acquiring and maintaining unusual aircraft. These helicopters had been so heavily modified for the film that they were no longer practical for normal helicopter operations, making them more valuable as movie props than as actual working aircraft. The collector saw an opportunity to lease them out to other film and television productions, essentially extending their Hollywood careers. Just a few years later, one of the Blue Thunder helicopters found new work in an unusual role. ABC was producing America, a controversial 1987 miniseries that imagined the United States after being conquered and occupied by the Soviet Union. The production needed menacing military helicopters that would look convincingly Soviet and intimidating. The Blue Thunder helicopter was perfect for this purpose. The production team stripped off some of the American-style bolt-on parts, repainted the helicopter in dark colors, and added Soviet-style markings and identification numbers. The helicopter that had represented cutting-edge American military technology just 4 years earlier was now playing the enemy, swooping through scenes as a symbol of Soviet oppression in an occupied America. The irony wasn't lost on film buffs who recognized the distinctive profile of the modified Gazelle underneath the new paint job. This transformation from American hero to Soviet villain perfectly captured the malleable nature of movie props, showing how the same piece of equipment can serve completely opposite narrative purposes with just some paint and creative set dressing. Fact 11. Sweden's missing car stunt. One of Blue Thunder's strangest mysteries involves a spectacular car stunt that most viewers around the world have never seen. The original Swedish video release of the film included an extended sequence where Kate, Murphy's girlfriend, is being chased by police through Los Angeles streets. In this version, Kate finds herself trapped in a narrow alley with police cars closing in from both directions. The stunt team filmed an elaborate maneuver where Kate's car goes up on two wheels, flipping sideways at high speed to squeeze through the tight space, barely avoiding the police cruisers. The stunt was dangerous and expensive to film, requiring careful timing and expert driving to pull off safely. However, in every other release of Blue Thunder worldwide, including the US theatrical version, home video releases, television broadcasts, and streaming versions. This entire stunt sequence is completely absent. The scene cuts from Kate entering the alley directly to her emerging on the other side, with unexplained damage visible on her car's roof and sides. Film historians and Blue Thunder fans have spent years trying to understand why this discrepancy exists. Some theories suggest the stunt sequence was cut from most versions because it disrupted the film's pacing, or because there were concerns about the physics looking unrealistic. Others believe it was removed due to time constraints, as the film's final runtime needed to be shortened for optimal theatrical scheduling. What makes this particularly frustrating for collectors is that the original Swedish video release is extremely rare and difficult to find, making it nearly impossible for most fans to see this missing footage. It remains one of those tantalizing pieces of lost film history that might exist somewhere in a vault. Fact 12. Germany saw it. First, American audiences might assume that Blue Thunder, an action film set in Los Angeles and featuring American actors and American military technology, would naturally premiere in the United States. However, the film's worldwide release strategy had a surprising twist. Blue Thunder actually made its debut in West Germany on February 5, 1983, more than 3 months before American audiences got to see it on May 13th. This wasn't an accident or a leak, but rather a calculated business decision by Columbia Pictures based on market research and distribution strategies. The studio had identified Germany as a particularly strong market for American action films, especially those involving helicopters, military technology, and urban warfare. German audiences had shown consistent enthusiasm for this type of thriller, and Columbia wanted to build momentum and word-of-mouth buzz in Europe before the crucial American summer movie season began. The gamble paid off spectacularly. Blue Thunder became an instant hit in Germany, exceeding all box office expectations and becoming Columbia Pictures' biggest German success since Close Encounters of the Third Kind had dominated theaters years earlier. The film's combination of high-tech military hardware, Vietnam War subtext, and paranoid conspiracy thriller elements resonated strongly with German audiences during the Cold War era. This success generated positive international press and industry buzz that helped build anticipation for the American release months later. It was an early example of studios recognizing that the international market could be just as important, if not more important, than domestic box office performance, a strategy that would become increasingly common in later decades. Fact 13. The cannon was wooden. The most intimidating feature of the Blue Thunder helicopter is the massive 20mm cannon mounted prominently on its nose, which rotates menacingly and fires devastating bursts during the film's action sequences. This weapon system was supposed to represent cutting-edge military technology, a fearsome tool that made Blue Thunder virtually unstoppable in combat situations. However, the impressive cannon that terrified audiences was actually an ingenious, low-tech prop made primarily from wooden dowels. The special effects team constructed the cannon using basic carpentry materials because they needed something that looked mechanically complex, but was light enough not to compromise the already overweight helicopter's ability to fly. The real challenge wasn't building the cannon itself, but creating convincing firing effects. To make the wooden weapon appear to shoot actual ammunition, the effects team installed metal tubing inside the dowel barrels and rigged up a system using automotive spark plugs that would ignite acetylene gas blown through the tubes at high pressure. When activated, this created bright muzzle flashes and realistic-looking discharge effects that the camera could capture from various angles. The biggest technical problem the team faced wasn't the flash effect, but getting the entire cannon assembly to rotate at a speed that looked convincing and militaristic on camera. The lightweight wooden construction actually helped solve this problem, as a real 20mm cannon would have been far too heavy for the small electric motors used to spin the prop. The resulting effect was so convincing that military and aviation experts who watched the film believed they were seeing an actual weapon system, not realizing they were looking at painted wood and gas-powered special effects. Fact 14. LAPD refused name usage. Even though Blue Thunder was filmed extensively throughout Los Angeles with significant cooperation from the Los Angeles Police Department, which provided access to locations, technical advisors, and even some equipment, the LAPD drew a hard line when it came to one crucial element. The film could not use the department's actual name. This created an unusual situation where viewers could clearly recognize Los Angeles locations, streets, and buildings, yet the police force operating in the city was referred to by fictional names throughout the entire movie. The LAPD's reasoning centered on concerns about public perception and paranoia. The film's plot revolves around a secret government program using an advanced surveillance helicopter to spy on American citizens, with corrupt officials planning to use the technology for political control and suppression of civil liberties. The LAPD feared that if their real department name was associated with such a dystopian surveillance program, even in a fictional context, it could generate genuine public anxiety and distrust. Citizens might start believing that the LAPD actually possessed such technology or harbored similar authoritarian intentions. To solve this problem, the filmmakers created fictional alternatives that maintained verisimilitude without directly referencing the real department. The police organization in Blue Thunder is called the Metropolitan Police, and Murphy and Lyman-Good work for the made-up ASTRO division, which stands for Airborne Special Tactical and Reconnaissance Operations. These names sound plausible enough that casual viewers might not notice they're fictional, while the LAPD maintained plausible deniability about any connection to the film's more controversial elements. Fact 15. MacGyver cameo appearance. Blue Thunder's afterlife in Hollywood didn't end when the film left theaters or when the short-lived TV series was canceled. One of the modified Gazelle helicopters made a surprise appearance in another iconic 1980s television show, creating a fun piece of crossover trivia for fans of both properties. In 1985, when ABC was producing the pilot episode for MacGyver, the production needed a military-style helicopter for several key scenes. Rather than building their own props or renting expensive military aircraft, the MacGyver production team leased one of the former Blue Thunder helicopters, which was still available through the New Mexico salvage collector who owned them. To avoid copyright issues and make the helicopter fit into MacGyver's world, the production team made several modifications. The most obvious change was the paint job, which was completely redone to remove any Blue Thunder-specific colors or markings. They also changed the identification number painted on the helicopter's side from 02, which it had carried in Blue Thunder, to 51. The surveillance equipment and some of the more distinctive bolt-on parts were removed to make the aircraft look more like a standard military transport helicopter rather than a specialized spy platform. However, if you watch the MacGyver pilot carefully and know what to look for, you can still identify it as the former Blue Thunder helicopter by its distinctive modified profile and by the mounting pylons that remain visible on the fuselage where surveillance equipment had been attached. For helicopter enthusiasts and fans of 1980s action television, spotting this cameo is like finding an Easter egg decades before Easter eggs became a standard part of pop culture.